The machine stopped at 11:17 in the morning, and in less than a minute, the entire factory went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that makes 50 grown engineers stare at one another like children lost in a storm. The giant press, the heart of Veyron Foods' packaging plant, had frozen mid-cycle with 40,000 lunch kits trapped on the line, $1 million shipment due before sunset, and every warning light flashing like a funeral candle. For 6 hours, experts opened panels, checked codes, replaced sensors, and argued over blueprints, but nothing worked. Then a tired single father in a faded gray uniform walked in holding his little boy's lunchbox, touched one small bolt near the side rail, and the monster came back to life in 1 second. Before this story begins, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Lifeline Diaries if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet people the world often overlooks. His name was Raviq Nadeem, and no one in that factory expected miracles from him. He was not one of the engineers flown in from the head office. He did not wear a white helmet or carry a tablet full of diagrams. He was a maintenance helper, the man people called when oil spilled near the loading bay, when a drain clogged, when someone needed a ladder but did not want to fetch it themselves. His uniform always smelled faintly of grease and baby soap because every morning before work, under the pale gold light of day, he braided his daughter's hair, packed his son's lunch, and washed the dishes left from the night before. His wife had died 3 years earlier from a fever that turned dangerous too quickly, leaving him with 2 children, a rented room above a pharmacy, and a grief so heavy he had learned to fold it quietly and carry it in his chest. That morning had already been difficult before the machine failed. Raviq's 7-year-old son, Ilyas, had cried because his school shoes were splitting near the toe, and his 10-year-old daughter, Naira, had pretended not to notice that her father had skipped breakfast again so there would be enough eggs for them. Raviq had smiled through it, kissed their foreheads, and promised that better days were coming, though he had no proof except his own stubborn heart. By 9 a.m., he was at the factory, tightening loose cart wheels and wiping dust from the back corridor, while executives in pressed shirts prepared for the biggest production day of the year. A charity contract was being packed for flood-affected schools, and every lunch kit had to leave before evening. The plant manager, Mr. Orvin Hale, repeated that failure was not an option, as if machines listened to threats. When the main press stopped, panic spread faster than steam. Workers gathered behind yellow safety lines. Supervisors shouted into phones. Engineers surrounded the machine with laptops, meters, and nervous hands. The press was enormous, steel blue and taller than a house, responsible for sealing thousands of food trays every hour. Without it, the entire operation was useless. Raviq stood near the back with a mop in his hand, watching the experts remove panels and speak in clipped technical words. He recognized the sound the machine had made just before stopping, a faint metallic cough followed by a flat click. It reminded him of something from years ago, from when he had worked night shifts beside an old German machine in a smaller factory before layoffs swallowed the place whole. He stepped closer once, only once, and quietly told a junior supervisor that the left side rail might be binding under pressure. The supervisor barely looked at him. He told Raviq to stay clear because this was an engineering issue. The words stung more than they should have, not because they were new, but because they were familiar. Raviq stepped back. Men like him learned early that being right did not matter if your shirt had your name stitched on cheaply. So he returned to the shadows near the tool shelves, watching, listening, carrying the truth like a burning coal in his palm. Hour after hour passed. The engineers changed a sensor. Nothing. They reset the controller. Nothing. They checked the hydraulic pressure. Normal. They called the manufacturer. No answer quick enough. Outside, sunlight moved across the factory floor, turning silver machines bright and then dull again. Inside, the air grew hot with frustration. Mr. Hale's face turned red as he imagined penalties, lost contracts, newspaper headlines, and his own career cracking open. Workers whispered about unpaid overtime and cancelled bonuses. In the middle of it all, Raviq's phone buzzed with a message from Naira's teacher saying Ilyas had forgotten his lunchbox in the morning rush. Raviq looked at the small blue box in his locker and felt a familiar ache. His children had so little, and still life found ways to take more. At 3:23 p.m., the head engineer declared that the press might need a full teardown, a job that could take 2 days. The words fell over the factory like black rain. 2 days meant ruined food, broken promises, and wages cut from people already living too close to the edge. One older line worker began crying quietly because her husband's medicine depended on the week's bonus. Raviq saw her wipe her face with her sleeve, and something inside him shifted. He thought of his wife, Samina, and how she used to tell him that knowledge was also a form of kindness when used at the right time. He thought of his children waiting after school. He thought of all the times he had stayed silent because the world had taught him his voice was small. So Raviq walked forward. At first, no one moved. A few workers turned. One engineer frowned. Mr. Hale snapped that the area was restricted. Raviq stopped just outside the safety line, his hands rough, his boots dusty, his voice low but steady. He said the machine was not dead. It was protecting itself. The guide rail had shifted by less than a finger's width, just enough to make the press believe the tray mold was misaligned. The sensors were not broken. They were telling the truth. The room seemed to hold its breath. One engineer laughed under his breath, and that tiny laugh was cruel enough to make several workers look down. Mr. Hale asked him what made him so certain. Raviq did not answer with pride. He told them he had heard the same sound once before, years ago, when a worn locking bolt expanded in afternoon heat and trapped the rail under pressure. He asked for permission to touch one point on the side frame. Not repair the machine. Not open the panel. Just touch one point. The head engineer objected, but the shipment clock was bleeding minutes, and desperation makes room where respect does not. Mr. Hale finally waved his hand. Raviq stepped inside the line. The machine towered over him, all steel and warning lights. For a moment, he seemed very small beneath it. He placed Ilyas's forgotten lunchbox on the floor, took a short wrench from his pocket, and moved to the left side rail. His fingers found a small locking bolt half hidden behind a bracket, a place none of the engineers had checked because the diagnostic screen had not accused it. He turned it not even a full rotation, just enough to release the pressure. There was a soft click, like a tired chest finally breathing. The warning lights vanished. The green-ready light blinked once. Then the giant press roared back to life. For 3 seconds, nobody spoke. Then the factory exploded with sound. Workers shouted. Someone clapped. Someone laughed through tears. The line began moving again, trays sliding forward as if the last 6 hours had been a bad dream. Mr. Hale stared at Raviq as if seeing him for the first time. The engineers looked at the tiny bolt, then at their screens, then at the man in the gray uniform whose hands were shaking not from fear but from the weight of being noticed after years of being invisible. But the most powerful moment did not happen when the machine started. It happened when Raviq bent down, picked up the blue lunchbox, and quietly asked if he could leave early for 20 minutes to take food to his son. The room went still again, but differently this time. The older worker who had been crying covered her mouth. Mr. Hale's face changed. Maybe he saw the man behind the uniform. Maybe he saw the father who had saved the company and was still worried about a hungry child. Maybe, for the first time that day, he understood that the people at the bottom were holding up far more than machines. By evening, the shipment left on time. Every truck rolled out under the warm amber light of day, carrying meals for children who would never know the name of the man who saved their lunches. The factory workers gathered near the gate as Raviq returned with Ilyas, who clung shyly to his father's hand. Naira stood beside him too, her schoolbag almost as big as her shoulders. Mr. Hale came forward in front of everyone and apologized. Not with a speech polished for cameras, but with a trembling honesty that made the workers quiet. He admitted that they had ignored Raviq because of his position, not his ability. He announced that Raviq would be promoted to senior maintenance specialist, with proper pay, benefits, and an education fund for his children. Raviq did not cry right away. He only looked at Naira and Ilyas, as if checking whether the moment was real enough for them to remember. Then Ilyas opened the lunchbox and offered his father half a piece of bread he had saved from school. That broke him. Raviq pressed the bread to his lips, closed his eyes, and tears ran down his face in front of the whole factory. Not tears of weakness. Tears of a man who had carried too much alone and had finally been allowed to set some of it down. Months later, the little bolt on the left side rail was painted red, not because it was dangerous, but because everyone wanted to remember. New engineers were told the story during training. They were taught that machines speak in sounds, smells, tremors, and tiny changes no manual can fully explain. They were taught that wisdom can wear a faded uniform, carry a lunchbox, and stand quietly in the back of the room. And above the maintenance door, someone placed a small sign that read, "Listen before you judge." If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Lifeline Diaries. Your support helps more stories of kindness, dignity, and second chances reach people who may need hope today. Special request: comment, respect every hidden hero, if you believe no person should ever be judged by their job title. Years later, when Naira became a mechanical engineer herself, she kept her father's old wrench on her desk. Whenever someone young or nervous tried to speak in a meeting, she made sure the room listened. And whenever people asked why, she smiled and told them about a bright afternoon when 50 engineers could not fix a machine, but one single dad repaired it in 1 second, not because he was lucky, not because he was magic, but because love had taught him to notice what others ignored.